It was an ordinary Saturday when my youngest son, James, called me with news that would change everything. He sounded nervous, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important." My heart raced as I braced myself for what was to come. We had always been close, and I could tell this was serious. "Sure, honey, what's going on?" I replied, trying to mask my concern with a soothing tone. James hesitated, and I could hear him taking a deep breath on the other end of the line. "I'm engaged to Madison." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind raced as I processed the information. Madison was a sweet girl I had met a few times, but I knew her father, Samuel, had strong opinions about relationships. "Oh, wow, that's great news," I managed to say, even though my stomach churned with worry. I had heard stories about Samuel's controlling nature, and I couldn't shake the feeling that their love would face many obstacles. James seemed to sense my hesitation. "Mom, I know what you're thinking about my dad, but Madison is different. We love each other, and I'm ready for this." I wished I could share in his excitement, but a knot tightened in my stomach as I thought about Samuel. "Have you talked to him about this?" I asked cautiously, knowing that Samuel's approval was crucial. James sighed heavily. "I tried, but he didn't take it well. He thinks I'm too young to make this kind of decision." Hearing this, I felt a wave of concern wash over me. I wanted James to be happy, but I also knew how powerful Samuel's influence could be. "Just remember, James, you need to stand firm in what you want," I advised. But deep down, I felt a sense of dread. This was just the beginning, and I feared the challenges that lay ahead. As the weeks went by, I watched James become increasingly stressed. Every time he spoke about Madison, there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Samuel's disapproval loomed over him like a dark cloud, and I could see it taking a toll on his confidence. "I just don't understand why he can't support us," James confided one evening. "It feels like I'm constantly fighting a losing battle." Hearing his frustration broke my heart. I wanted to assure him that love could conquer all, but the reality of their situation was daunting. James loved Madison deeply, but Samuel's negativity was a constant weight on his shoulders. "You have to remember that love is worth fighting for," I encouraged him, trying to instill some hope. But as days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted, and I saw my son withdrawing into himself. Then came the fateful day when James received a text from Madison. She was in tears, and he rushed out the door without a second thought. "Mom, I need to go," he said, urgency in his voice. I watched him leave, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. I knew this was a critical moment, and I could only hope that they would face whatever challenge lay ahead together. When James arrived at Madison's house, he found her father waiting for him. Samuel stood in the doorway with a fierce expression, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "I think it's time we had a little chat, don't you?" he said, his tone dripping with disdain. My heart sank as I imagined the confrontation. I could only pray that James would hold his ground. Inside the house, the tension crackled like electricity. James felt the weight of Samuel's stare as he stepped further into the living room. "You're making a huge mistake, James," Samuel warned, his voice low and threatening. "My daughter deserves someone who can provide for her, and you're not that guy." I could only imagine how my son felt at that moment, facing the man who held so much power over his relationship. But James wasn't going to back down. "I love Madison, and I'm going to prove that to you," he replied, his voice steady despite the shaking in his hands. I could almost feel the energy shift through the phone as they stood facing each other. Their argument escalated quickly, with Samuel hurling insults about James's future. "You'll never be good enough for her," he spat, and I could hear the pain behind James's fierce determination. The fight spiraled into a shouting match, and I couldn't help but worry. I could only listen, my heart pounding as James defended himself. "I'm not afraid of you, Samuel. I'm going to take care of Madison, and I won't let you dictate our lives anymore." Those words resonated with a strength I hadn't seen in him before, and a glimmer of hope ignited within me. Perhaps this confrontation could serve as a catalyst for change. But the meeting ended with Samuel slamming the door in James's face, leaving my son shaken and furious. When he came home, the fire in his eyes had dimmed. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart ached for him. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would all be okay, but the reality was harsh. Samuel's control was suffocating, and I could see the toll it was taking on James. In the days that followed, James and Madison struggled to find their footing. I watched as they leaned on each other for support, but I could feel the strain in their relationship. Each time they tried to talk about their future, Samuel's shadow loomed over them, casting doubt on their plans. "It shouldn't be this hard," Madison told me one afternoon, her eyes filled with frustration. "I just want my dad to be happy for us." I wished I could offer her more than just a listening ear. "Sometimes parents struggle to let go," I said, trying to provide some perspective. "It's not easy for them to accept that their children are growing up." But deep down, I knew Samuel's control was more than just overprotectiveness. It was a powerful need to dictate their lives. One evening, as James and I sat on the porch, he finally opened up. "Mom, I'm scared. What if I lose her because of him?" I could see the pain etched on his face, and it broke my heart. "You have to fight for what you want, James," I urged him gently. "Love is worth it, and if you truly believe in your relationship, don't let anyone take that away from you." But I could sense the battle within him. Samuel's influence was like a heavy chain, binding him and making him doubt himself. That night, as I lay in bed, I wondered if they could overcome this obstacle. I had seen love conquer many things, but could it withstand Samuel's grip? The thought kept me awake, worrying about my son's future and the choices he would have to make. Finally, after weeks of tension, James decided it was time to confront Samuel again. "I can't keep living like this, Mom," he said one evening, his expression resolute. "I have to stand up for myself and for Madison. If I don't, I'll lose everything I care about." His determination filled me with hope, but I was also terrified for him. I knew Samuel wouldn't take kindly to being challenged again. James and Madison agreed to meet Samuel together, believing that unity was their strongest weapon. "We have to show him that we're serious," Madison said, her voice filled with conviction. The date was set, and I could feel the anticipation building in the air. Would this be the moment when they could finally take control of their own lives, or would it lead to another painful confrontation? On the day of the meeting, I felt a mixture of hope and dread as I waited for their return. James had promised to keep me updated, but the clock ticked slowly, and I couldn't shake my anxiety. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room as I paced back and forth. I knew this meeting could change everything, but I feared the worst. When they finally returned, James looked different, haggard but determined. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. We finally stood up to him. I felt a rush of relief wash over me, but I also sensed the tension still lingering in the air. "What happened?" I asked, my heart racing. The meeting had started with the same tense atmosphere as before. Samuel was sitting with his arms crossed, his expression guarded. "So, what's this about?" he sneered as James and Madison entered the room. But this time, they were ready. Madison spoke first, her voice steady. "Dad, we're here because we need to talk about our future together." Samuel rolled his eyes, clearly dismissive. "You two don't know what you're talking about," he shot back. But James stepped forward, his heart pounding. "No, we do. We love each other, and we want your support, but we won't let you dictate our lives anymore." The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment, it felt like the air had been sucked out. James's words hung heavy in the air as Samuel stared at him, incredulous. "You think you can just waltz in here and demand my support?" he retorted, his voice rising. But this time, James didn't flinch. "It's not a demand. It's a plea for understanding. We're both adults, and we want to make our own choices." I could only imagine how hard it was for James to stand there, facing his father with so much on the line. But as the conversation unfolded, I felt a surge of pride for my son. He had finally found his voice, and it resonated with strength. Samuel's facade of control began to crack as the reality of their determination sank in. As the conversation continued, I could feel the tension in the air shift. Samuel's anger simmered beneath the surface, but I could also see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You really think you can just walk away from your responsibilities?" he challenged, his tone sharp. James stood firm, refusing to let Samuel's words shake him. "This isn't about responsibility. It's about love. I won't let you tear us apart anymore." The confrontation escalated, with Samuel launching into a tirade about how James was making a huge mistake. "You don't know what it's like to be a man," he shouted, his voice echoing in the room. But James was ready for this fight. "I'm not trying to be you, Dad. I want to carve my own path, and that includes Madison." The tension reached a breaking point as Samuel's fury boiled over. "You think you can just throw everything away for some girl?" he bellowed, but James countered fiercely. "It's not about throwing anything away. It's about choosing to build a future with the person I love." In that moment, something shifted. Samuel's anger faltered, and I sensed a crack in his armor. "Fine," he spat, "but don't come running to me when it all falls apart." As they left, James looked relieved but exhausted. I knew this was just the beginning, but it felt like they had finally taken the first step toward independence. In the following days, the air felt lighter. James and Madison had triumphed over Samuel's grip, but the aftermath was still fraught with uncertainty. They began to make plans for their future together, and it was a joy to see them hopeful again. "Mom, we're really doing this," James said one night, excitement evident in his voice. "I can finally see a future with Madison, and it feels right." However, Samuel's reaction was still a cloud hanging over them. I watched as they navigated their newfound freedom, trying to embrace it while being cautious of any backlash. "What if he tries to come after us?" Madison asked one evening, her eyes wide with concern. "I'm not going to let him control us anymore," James reassured her, but I could see the doubt flickering in his eyes. As they moved forward, I did my best to support them. I listened to their plans, offered advice, and cheered them on as they took steps to solidify their relationship. But Samuel's shadow still lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't be the end of the fight. It was merely a pause before the next storm. One weekend, as they were planning their wedding, Madison received a call from her mother, Avery. "I just wanted to check in on you both," Avery said, her voice warm. "Your dad has been difficult lately, and I'm worried about you two." It struck me how even Madison's mother felt the pressure of Samuel's control. "We're okay, Mom," Madison assured her, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Just when things seemed to be stabilizing, Samuel made an unexpected move. He contacted James directly, asking to meet. "I don't know if this is a good idea," James confided in me, his brow furrowed with concern. "What if he's just trying to manipulate me again?" I felt my heart race. "You need to protect yourself, but if you think there's a chance for peace, it might be worth hearing him out," I advised, unsure of what would come next. When the meeting day arrived, I could hardly breathe. I wanted to accompany him, but James insisted he could handle it alone. "I need to show him I'm not a kid anymore," he said, determination evident in his voice. As he left, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. What if this meeting only served to reignite old tensions? James arrived at the coffee shop where they agreed to meet, and I imagined the mix of emotions swirling within him. Samuel arrived promptly, his expression unreadable. "You've made some choices that I don't agree with," he began, his tone clipped. But instead of launching into an attack, he surprised James with an unexpected proposition. "I think we should find a way to work together." James's heart raced as he processed the words. "What do you mean?" he asked, skepticism dripping from his voice. Samuel leaned in closer. "I want to support you and Madison, but you need to understand that I won't let you ruin her future." I held my breath, wondering if this was a genuine attempt at reconciliation or just another manipulation tactic. As their conversation unfolded, I could sense a shift in the dynamic. Samuel began to share his perspective, explaining his worries about James's ability to provide for Madison. "I know you love her, but love alone won't pay the bills," he said, his tone surprisingly softer than before. James listened, torn between his desire to defend his choices and a newfound understanding of his father's fears. "I get it, Dad," he replied cautiously. "But we're willing to work hard for our future together. I don't expect you to approve right away, but I want you to at least see that we're serious." It was a pivotal moment, one that I hoped could lead to healing rather than further conflict. Samuel paused, contemplating James's words. "Maybe I've been too harsh," he admitted, surprising both James and myself. "I just want what's best for Madison. If you're truly committed, I might be able to help." The conversation shifted from confrontation to cooperation, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. When James returned home, his face was a mix of relief and disbelief. "I think my dad is actually trying to come around," he said, still processing the unexpected turn of events. "He wants to help us, Mom." I felt a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps this was the turning point they needed to bridge the gap between their worlds. With Samuel's unexpected willingness to support their relationship, James and Madison began to make strides toward their future. They started planning their wedding, pouring their energy into creating a day that reflected their love and commitment. It was a beautiful process, filled with laughter and joy as they made decisions together. But the shadow of Samuel still lingered. What if he's just biding his time? Madison voiced her concerns one afternoon as they sorted through invitations. "I don't want to get too comfortable and have him pull the rug out from under us." James nodded, his expression serious. "We need to stay vigilant. We can't let our guard down completely." As the wedding day approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. James and Madison had come so far, but I worried about the potential for conflict. However, I also saw how their bond had grown stronger through adversity. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," James reassured me. I admired his determination to protect his love and his family. The day of the wedding finally arrived, and I could hardly contain my excitement. The venue was beautifully decorated, and the atmosphere was charged with love and anticipation. I watched as James stood at the altar, his eyes filled with emotion. When Madison appeared, radiant in her gown, I felt tears welling in my eyes. This was their moment, and nothing else mattered. As they exchanged vows, I could feel the love radiating from them. It was a moment of triumph, a celebration of their resilience and commitment. Samuel was seated among the guests, his expression unreadable. I held my breath, wondering how he would react to this new chapter. But as the ceremony unfolded, I noticed a hint of softness in his gaze. Perhaps love was beginning to break through the barriers he had built around his heart. After the ceremony, the reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and joy. It felt like a dream come true as James and Madison celebrated their love with family and friends. Samuel even approached them with a tentative smile, congratulating them. "You both looked great out there," he said, his tone surprisingly warm. It was a moment I never thought I would witness, and it filled my heart with hope. As the night went on, I watched James and Madison dance together, their love shining bright. I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. They had faced obstacles that would have torn many apart, but they had emerged stronger. In that moment, I realized that love had the power to heal wounds and bridge divides. As the festivities continued, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. James and Madison had chosen each other despite the odds, and their love was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but as they embraced their new beginning, I had faith that they would face whatever came their way together. With laughter echoing in the air and love surrounding us, I couldn't help but feel that we were on the brink of something beautiful. The struggles may have shaped them, but they had also forged an unbreakable bond. And as I looked around at the faces of our family and friends, I felt a sense of peace. This was only the beginning of their journey, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead them next.